All right, we're out on the river today catching a few wild browns, medium sized, pretty small really, but beautiful little wild fish. We're going to show you a little bit about different leader setups and how to utilize the micro leader when you're Euro nymphing.
That's a big brown, bro.
Hi fly fishers, Lance here from Fly Fish Food. We're out Euro nymphing on the river today, and we just had a few thoughts, a few tips that came to us while we're fishing, particularly about using the right leader setup and getting kind of graduating, if you will, into thinner and thinner leaders, into what we call micro leaders. So I've got a couple of rods rigged today. One is, they're both 10 footers. One is with a micro leader setup and one is with a 20-pound butt section leader setup. So they both have times and places where they can be advantageous, but generally speaking, I think it's best to use as thin of a leader as you can stand. Now I say as you can stand in that the thinner you go with the leader, the harder it is to cast. So one of the things that I think we kind of missed on in our modern nymphing videos is talking more about the leaders and how to utilize them. So we hope to clear that up for you today. Okay, so I've set the micro leader rod down just so I can go back and forth, talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages. So right now I have the 20-pound system, so I still have a Euro line on both of them. They're both Euro rods, both 10 footers. This has a straight 20-pound butt section to a thicker cider. This cider I think is 013 or 014 diameter. And then I have a 2-fly setup. And I'm gonna just take a couple steps out here and fish this and then kind of walk through what I think some of the advantages of this system are. So number one, the biggest advantage of the heavier leader system is that it has a little more directional control. The knock on the micro leader is that it's really hard to control. It doesn't have much stiffness or mass, where this 20-pound butt section really directs right where I want it to go. So I have great control, great accuracy. Another advantage is that with the thicker leader, I can fish thicker cider, and with thicker cider is a little bit easier to see. So if you have poorer vision and you're having a hard time finding your cider, maybe use a thicker leader that allows you to fish a thicker cider. That'll give you a little better visibility. The disadvantage to this particular setup, especially when you start fishing at distance, is you can see that it starts to sag a little more. The butt section in 20-pound or even 15 or 12 is quite a bit thicker, therefore heavier than the micro leader setup. So when I start fishing this farther and farther away, with the rod held high, the leader's going to sag quite a bit more, which takes me out of contact a little bit. It doesn't allow my flies to get to depth as quickly. So there are some disadvantages to this setup. I like to use the thicker leader butt for things like floating the cider, maybe even a dry and a dropper in real tight spots where you're trying to have pinpoint accuracy, versus the micro leader I think is better for fishing farther away or in more open areas. So this rig's casting pretty well. I'm able to place it right where I want. I can see the cider really easily. But if I try and extend this a little ways and fish a little ways further out, the cider wants to fall and sag and I can't fish quite as far away. So now let's switch to the micro leader. All right, now I set down the thicker 20-pound leader and I've picked up the micro leader. Now before I fish this one, it's important to note we're fishing two extremes here. This is quite thin and that's quite thick. You can fish a range of diameters between these two. And I wouldn't suggest, if you're used to fishing a thicker butt section, I would not suggest immediately going to the thinnest you can go. I would step you down. If you're used to a 20, try a 15. When you get used to a 15, try a 10 or 12. When you get used to a 10 or 12, try a 6 or 8. This micro leader, and micro leader is a relative term, you could classify all kinds of thinner leader materials into there. This particular one is, I've got a tiny bit of 6-pound amnesia connecting to my fly line. So maybe, 24 inches of that, and then a really smooth blood knot to some 4X material. So this is just like 4X cider material. You could also use 3X, 2X, 1X, whatever you like. 6-pound amnesia would work well for a thinner leader. The thinner you go, the farther away you can fish with less sag. So this one is about 4X diameter. 7/1000 of an inch, and I'm fairly used to it, so I still have pretty good control with it, but it doesn't go immediately to the exact same places as the 20-pound leader does. As you try these different diameters, you'll see what I mean by that. This one has a lot less sag though. I'm not sure how well it shows up on the camera, but you can see I'm pretty tight. I don't have much sag in the leader. The leader stays relatively tight. And if you're not used to watching a micro leader, you might think, if you're watching somebody use one, you might think they're pulling their flies too much, but it's just that much better contact because it has very little sag, especially at short range like this. Now, oh, there's a fish. The old red dart came through. This is a shameless plug, but I already fished that exact same spot with the other leader and with other flies. I put the micro leader on with the red dart and the fish show up. You gotta have some darts in your fly box. All right. Oh, well, adios brown. That wasn't exactly how I wanted to release, but hey, sometimes they don't give you the option. So anyhow, back to the micro leader. I still have a fair bit of control, although I have to admit, when I first went to the micro leader, when I first heard of it years ago, and I tried it, I did not like it initially. I found that I had really a tough time controlling where my casts were going. You have to really focus in on the 180-degree rule that we talk about in Modern Nymphing Elevated, making sure your back casts are going 180 degrees from where you're trying to place your flies. But if you do that, I think with a little practice, you'll get used to the micro leader. All right, I took a couple steps out here, and the advantage, real big advantage to this micro leader, in addition to strike detection, is just the ability to fish farther away with very little sag. So you can fish with pretty light flies and still fish across the river a ways. So you don't always need to fish that far away. I would argue it's better to fish as close as you can. But in some situations, not necessarily here today, the river's not particularly clear, but in some situations, getting 2 or 3 steps closer means you might have spooked those fish. So it's better off to stay back and be able to cover water like this run right over here on this edge with that micro leader and have very little sag. There, I got to the bottom. Oh, there was a fish. I missed him. Anyhow, fish the micro leader. Again, step down in increments. Don't go right from a super thick leader to a thin leader. If you get used to the micro leader, I think for most of your nymphing, you'll have a hard time going back. All right, I've got the micro leader on here still. It allows me to fish a little further away with very little sag. Keeps me in contact so that I can see when fish are eating, can tell when I'm contacting bottom. Like that, it's the bottom. I'm high sticking over that faster current and fishing just the flies over in that slightly slower stuff on the other bank, and there's a fish. Micro leader gives you the ability, hey, jumping brown, to reach across stuff a little better than the thicker leaders do. Again, the disadvantage to the thinner leader is it's harder to send where you want it. All right, one other cool new trick with Euro nymphing is neon wax, and it's really not crazy new. It's been around for a little while. We have this stuff, it's called Scaphar's neon wax. Comes in lots of colors. It's really bright, and you can add it anywhere on your line or on your leader, on your sider. You can even add it to the clear tippet. So one of the tricks lately is a lot of people are leaving the section from their sider or the end of their leader to their first fly a little longer. So in this case, I have about 5.5 or 6 feet to my first fly. So if you leave that nice and long, you can then run this neon wax on the leader and make a really quick hot spot wherever you like. So I can put this right below my sider. I can add it to the sider. There's all kinds of ways to use this. Let's just put this one right on my sider here. And the other thing you could use is you can get this in different colors. So you could, if you were having a hard time seeing yellow cider, you could add orange to it. If you're having a hard time seeing, orange, you could add the yellow to it. but I think it's most useful to add to your clear tippet personally. Get a little bit more of it out here. You run it just basically through your leader like that, and it shows up. Stick the cap back on before I lose it into the drink. So I've got just a tiny gap between my yellow cider and now a little bit of clear tippet, and then the orange neon wax. The other thing you can do is add it halfway down your tippet so you could sink the wax. The wax does not float necessarily. It does have a little more surface area, but I can see that wax out there really, really well. It's quite bright. I've just added it right below my cider. And with this micro thin leader teamed with the neon wax, we have all kinds of adjustments we can make. So if I didn't want my cider, my tippet to be so long below the cider, below the leader, I could add that neon a foot or two above the flies if you want. So just one more trick. It's on our website, Skafars, S-K-A-F-A-R-S, Skafars Neon Wax. All right, one more thing to take note of when I'm guiding. I find that a lot of my clients are used to Euro nymphing, but they're used to Euro nymphing right under the rod tip, so they fish really close like this, which in some situations works quite well. But using this micro leader, you can fish it out here a long, long way and still have really good contact. The tricky part is learning to cast it, and more importantly, taking up slack. So you'll see that I'm shooting line on every cast and taking up slack on every cast. I'm fishing it up there quite a ways away. I still have great contact, still have great control, but I have to take up slack because if I make those same casts and I don't take up slack, my rod ends up way up here, and when I want to set the hook, I'm out of real estate. But if I take up slack, I can keep the rod quite a bit lower, stay in contact much better. I'm doing that by just taking line up with the non-rod hand. Taking up slack though, that's a really important part of fishing a thinner leader and fishing further away. All right, so I have the thick leader section, thick leader setup in my right hand, micro leader in my left. I have the same amount of line out. The rods are both held up at the same angle. Right now they're both tight, and I'm connected to a rock with the flies of both leaders. If I drop both of these down so that the rods remain level, you'll notice as you look upstream here that the heavier of the two, the 20-pound butt section, is sagging quite a bit more than the other. Again, if I go tight, if I lift them up, they're going to be equal, but as I feed them a little bit of slack and I'm drifting without tension, the rod's still at the same height, but the heavier leader sags more. It takes me out of strike detection, and also it does not allow my flies to sink as quickly because it's pulling the flies towards me rather than just letting them vertically fall. So the micro leader has advantages in sag. All right, one more advantage to the micro leader, or really I guess it's two-part, is that you can use lighter flies. Because the leader has less mass, less sag to it, it allows you to fish really light, small flies and still get down, because the leader, when you cast it, the leader's not sagging and dragging the flies back at you as much. So with that in mind, in the wintertime or in low flows or when the fish are really spooky and they don't like too heavy flies hitting them on the head, you can fish a lighter fly, or more commonly for me, you can fish a single fly, which is what I have on here now. So when you want to have pinpoint accuracy and really broken pocket water where you don't necessarily want the two flies in differing currents, because then neither one of them gets a very good drift, the micro leader allows you to fish a single fly. Oh, there's a fish, which gives you a bit more accuracy and control. And it also allows that fly to get down without the leader sagging back at you. Another little wild brownie on the red dart again. Caught one a minute ago on a Frenchie. Try the micro leader. I think you'll like it for single flies, for small flies, and for fishing farther away. Woo! There's a better fish. Single nymph on the dart. All right, there's another fish on the red dart using the micro leader. Now that we've shown you a little bit about how to use the leader and the differences between the micro leader and the thicker leader on the water, let's head back to the shop and show you the details between the two. All right, we're back in the shop now, just got done fishing, and we want to show you the leader formulas that we were fishing out on the river. So starting with the thick leader formula, I have a 22 thousandths Euro specific line that I've needle nail knotted to some 20-pound Maxima chameleon. So I have about 12 feet of this Maxima chameleon that then is blood knotted to some 014 cider, and then it terminates at a tippet ring. To the tippet ring, I've then uni knotted my tippet. So this is 6X that I was using on the river, and I like to go about 4 to 6 feet to my first fly and about 2 feet, 20 to 24 inches to the second fly. So that's the heavy leader setup. The micro thin leader setup is a little bit different. It is significantly thinner. So starting at the fly line on this one, again a Euro specific fly line, 22 thousandths. I've again needle nail knotted it. You can also nail knot or super glue splice, which we'll talk more about here in a second. I've got, what is that, maybe 24 inches, 22 inches, somewhere in there, of 6-pound amnesia, and then I just go blood knot straight to the super thin stuff. So this is 4x diameter. You can get 4x diameter from Umpqua. You can get 4x diameter in a few different bright materials. You could also try 3, you could try 2x, any of those will work. But this particular one then goes to the 4x diameter all the way down to the cider. The cider is also 4x. This is just the Umpqua 4x. Tippet ring, same thing, 6x, about 6 feet to the first fly, and in this case I was only fishing a single fly at the end, so I've only got the one, no tag I should say. If I was going to fish 2 flies, I would then do a triple surgeons here and add a bit more tippet. Okay, so those are the 2 leader setups. Now, one thing that we just stressed on the river, but I want to stress again, is that you don't want to go directly from the 20-pound or even a 15-pound leader right down to this super thin stuff. You want to gradually work your way down. So again, if you're fishing already a 15 or a 12, then try a 10 or an 8. If you're already fishing a 10 or an 8, try 6. And not everybody loves the super thin stuff. You might find somewhere in there that's a happy medium for you as far as control and visibility and so on. But just keep in mind, the thinner the leader is, the less sag you'll have, the farther away you'll be able to fish. All right, now let's talk about line to leader connections. We harsh a lot on loop-to-loop connections. Loop-to-loop connections are really bad for this. You've got a super long leader that's going to go in and out of the guides, and you need to have a really smooth connection. So we don't really like loops. I don't like loops on almost any of my line to leader connections, even if I'm not Euro nymphing. Usually I cut them off, but they are really convenient. So for most situations where you're using a shorter leader, they're tolerable, I suppose. But there are several ways to connect your Euro leader to your Euro fly line. One is a loop-to-loop. I think that's the worst of them. That is an option. Another is to shave the coating off of the fly line and double the fly line over, and we'll show you all these in a second here. Maybe right now. I'm not sure how Curtis is going to edit, but we're going to we flip the coating around, or strip the coating, excuse me, turn the coating around, create a loop, and put some thread over the top of the 2, and then seal them with super glue or UV resin. You could just do a really clean nail knot. It's important I stress really clean. I get people that message me on social media all the time and say, I tied a nail knot, but it's hanging up on my guides. And if I have them send me a picture of the nail knot, inevitably the nail knot is terrible. It's got wraps that are overlapping each other, and it's not a clean tie. It needs to be a really clean tie, and you need to trim the tag ends, both the leader tag and the fly line tag, completely flush. So the knot needs to be cinched completely and the tags trimmed all the way off. Next, you could do a needle nail knot. That's my personal favorite. To do that connection, you have to have a braided core line. A monocore won't work. And then the other really smooth connection is a super glue splice. The super glue splice arguably is the smoothest. It's not my favorite because they do fail on occasion, but it is a really smooth connection. So if you're good at doing the super glue splice, or you can do a needle nail knot, I would encourage you to do either of those. Otherwise, a really clean nail knot would be the next best choice. Okay, so in conclusion, Get the best connection you can from your fly line to your leader, make it nice and smooth, and then go and play with these different diameters. If you get really frustrated with the one that's too thin, then revert back to what you're comfortable with. Bottom line, have fun, try these leaders, and go catch a fish. All of the materials needed to tie these leaders are in the links below in the description, so check those out.